Genesis Motu Memod, Profound Answers to Perennial Questions About God and Human Beings. Introduction. Genesis Motu Memod stands as one of the most influential sections of Scripture. Whether one approaches it from a theological, literary, or philosophical perspective, these chapters address some of humanity's deepest questions. Who are we? Why are we here? Why does evil exist? Why do relationships become broken? Why is the world filled with suffering? Why are there different nations and languages? And most importantly, what is God's relationship to humanity? The passage summarized above argues that Genesis 1-11 should not be understood merely as modern history, nor dismissed as simple myth. Rather, it is a profound creation flood story through which ancient writers explored theological truths about God, humanity, morality, and the human condition. Although these stories emerged in a world that lacked modern scientific and historical methods, they remain remarkably relevant because they address questions that every generation continues to ask. Their enduring value lies not primarily in explaining how the world was physically created, but in explaining why human life is the way it is. The stories provide profound answers to perennial questions about God and human beings. God is creator, a universe founded on purpose. Genesis begins with an extraordinary declaration. God speaks. Creation appears. Unlike many ancient stories in which the universe emerges through conflict, violence, or rivalry among competing gods, Genesis presents a God whose word alone creates order, beauty, and life. This teaches an important principle. The universe is not an accident. Human existence is not meaningless. Life has purpose because it originates from purposeful intention. Daily life application. Many people today struggle with feelings of emptiness. Students wonder whether their lives matter. Workers question whether their daily efforts have significance. Retirees may ask whether they still have purpose. Genesis responds by affirming that human beings exist because they were intentionally created. If creation has purpose, then every human life possesses dignity. This perspective changes how we treat ourselves and others. When we believe life is meaningful, we are more likely to respect ourselves, respect others, protect life, pursue meaningful goals, endure hardship with hope. For example, a teacher grading papers late at night may feel unnoticed. A parent caring for children may feel exhausted. A nurse working long shifts may feel overwhelmed. Genesis reminds us that ordinary work can have meaning because human beings participate in God's ordered creation. Purpose is not measured by fame. Purpose is measured by faithfulness. Tash, human beings as integral and important. Genesis portrays humanity as an integral part of creation. Humans are neither divine nor insignificant. They occupy a unique position within creation. This differs dramatically from certain ancient Near Eastern stories where humanity was created merely to serve the needs of the gods. In Genesis, God does not need human beings. Rather, God chooses relationship with them. This distinction is crucial. A needy God creates slaves. A loving God creates partners. Daily life application. Modern society often measures worth according to wealth, beauty, intelligence, social status, productivity. Genesis offers a different foundation for human value. Human dignity comes from being created by God. This means a wealthy person and a poor person possess equal worth. A healthy person and a disabled person possess equal worth. A successful executive and a struggling laborer possess equal worth. Understanding this truth can transform workplaces, families, and communities. When people recognize intrinsic human dignity, they become less likely to exploit others for personal gain. Human freedom and the reality of sin. The story of Adam and Eve addresses one of humanity's oldest questions. Why do human beings continually choose what is wrong? The narrative suggests that human beings possess freedom. Without freedom, there can be no genuine love. But freedom also creates the possibility of rebellion. The biblical writers place responsibility for brokenness upon human choices rather than divine error. This insight remains remarkably relevant. Daily life application. Every day we make decisions. Some are small. Others have lifelong consequences. We choose whether to tell the truth, whether to forgive, whether to act selfishly, whether to help someone in need. Modern culture often encourages us to blame circumstances, society, or other people for our failures. Genesis acknowledges external influences, but insists that human beings remain morally responsible. This does not mean every problem is caused by individual wrongdoing. Rather, it means that our choices genuinely matter. A marriage is strengthened through thousands of faithful choices. A friendship is preserved through honesty. A career is built through integrity. Character develops through repeated decisions. The Genesis narrative reminds us that sin begins long before visible actions. It begins in the heart. The spread of evil. As Genesis progresses, evil expands. What begins with individual disobedience grows into violence throughout society. The narrative suggests that sin is never merely personal. Its effects spread outward. Individual selfishness becomes family conflict. Family conflict becomes social injustice. Social injustice becomes widespread corruption. This pattern remains visible today. Daily life application. Consider a workplace where one employee begins manipulating information for personal advancement. Others observe this behavior. Some imitate it. Trust declines. Relationships deteriorate. Soon an entire organizational culture becomes unhealthy. The same pattern occurs within families. One unresolved conflict can influence generations. One act of forgiveness can also influence generations. Genesis teaches that our actions have consequences beyond ourselves. Therefore, personal virtue is never merely private. It contributes to the health of the wider community. The flood narrative, judgment and renewal. The flood story is often misunderstood as merely a story of destruction, yet its deeper theme is renewal. The narrative presents a world consumed by violence and corruption. God's judgment is directed not against creation itself, but against the destructive forces that threaten it. After the flood comes a new beginning. God reaffirms creation rather than abandoning it. This is one of the most hopeful messages in Genesis. Human failure does not eliminate divine commitment. Daily life application. Everyone experiences seasons that resemble floods. People encounter divorce, financial collapse, illness, grief, career failure, personal disappointment. During such moments, it may seem that everything has been lost. Yet the flood narrative teaches that endings can become beginnings. After devastation comes restoration. After failure comes growth. After grief comes healing. The lesson is not that suffering is good. Rather, it is that God can bring renewal even from situations that appear hopeless. Many successful individuals can testify that their greatest growth emerged from their greatest setbacks. The flood story invites perseverance. The covenant, God's faithfulness. Following the flood, God establishes a covenant. A covenant is more than a contract. It is a commitment rooted in relationship. The covenant demonstrates that God's faithfulness does not depend entirely upon human perfection. This theme runs throughout Scripture. Human beings fail repeatedly. God remains faithful. Daily life application. Trust forms the foundation of every healthy relationship. People flourish when commitments are honored. Parents who consistently care for children create security. Friends who remain loyal create trust. Spouses who keep promises strengthen relationships. Communities thrive when people honor their commitments. The covenant teaches the importance of reliability. In a world filled with temporary commitments, faithfulness remains revolutionary. Small acts of consistency often shape lives more profoundly than dramatic gestures. Showing up, keeping promises, being dependable. These simple practices reflect covenant faithfulness. Marriage and human relationships. The Genesis account addresses the nature of sexual attraction and marriage. The text recognizes humanity's longing for companionship. People are created for relationship. Isolation is not the ideal human condition. This insight remains psychologically and socially significant. Daily life application. Modern technology allows unprecedented connection, yet many people feel deeply lonely. Genesis reminds us that human beings require genuine relationships rather than merely digital interaction. Healthy relationships involve mutual respect, sacrifice, communication, commitment, trust. Marriage is one expression of humanity's relational nature, but the principle extends to friendships, families, and communities. Strong relationships contribute significantly to emotional well-being. Weak or broken relationships often become sources of suffering. The Genesis vision encourages intentional investment in relationships. Love grows through daily choices. Diversity, nations, and languages. The story of the Tower of Babel explores the existence of many peoples and languages. Rather than presenting diversity as a mistake, the narrative explains the reality of human cultural plurality. Human beings share a common origin, yet express themselves through diverse cultures and languages. Daily life application. The modern world is increasingly interconnected. People regularly interact with individuals from different cultures and beliefs. Genesis encourages humility. No single culture possesses complete understanding. Diversity can become a source of enrichment rather than division. In practical terms, this means listening before judging, learning from different perspectives, appreciating cultural differences, seeking unity without demanding uniformity. Successful organizations, schools, and communities often embrace diversity while maintaining shared values. The Babel story warns against pride while encouraging humility. God's justice and generosity. The summary above highlights how Genesis portrays God as just and generous. Justice and generosity may appear contradictory. Justice gives people what is deserved. Generosity gives more than is deserved. Yet Genesis portrays God embodying both qualities. Daily life application. Human relationships require both justice and mercy. Parents must establish boundaries while expressing love. Managers must uphold standards while showing compassion. Teachers must evaluate fairly while encouraging growth. A healthy society requires both accountability and grace. When justice exists without mercy, people become harsh. When mercy exists without justice, standards disappear. Genesis invites us to pursue balance. The human search for meaning. One of the greatest strengths of Genesis 1:11 is its exploration of meaning. Ancient writers believed that understanding origins helped explain present realities. Today, people continue searching for meaning. Scientific knowledge has expanded dramatically, yet existential questions remain. Why am I here? What should I value? What kind of person should I become? What gives life significance? Genesis answers by pointing toward relationship with God, responsibility toward others, and participation in creation. Daily life application meaning is often discovered not through extraordinary achievements, but through ordinary faithfulness. A meaningful life may include raising children responsibly, serving neighbors, working honestly, seeking truth, practicing compassion, growing spiritually. Many people spend years pursuing success only to discover that meaning cannot be purchased. Genesis directs attention toward character and relationships rather than mere accomplishment. Why these stories still matter. Some readers dismiss Genesis because it comes from an ancient world. However, the questions addressed by Genesis remain timeless. Technology has changed, human nature has not. People still struggle with pride, fear, loneliness, temptation, conflict, hope. The stories endure because they speak to these realities. Whether read devotionally, academically, or philosophically, Genesis invites readers to reflect on fundamental truths about existence. Conclusion. Genesis 1-11 provides far more than ancient stories about creation. It offers a profound reflection on God, humanity, morality, relationships, suffering, and hope. The narratives explain why human beings long for meaning, struggle with sin, seek companionship, create societies, experience conflict, and continue searching for God. Most importantly, these chapters affirm that human life possesses dignity because it originates in divine purpose. They teach that evil is real but not ultimate. Failure is serious but not final. Judgment exists, yet so does mercy. Diversity is part of human experience, yet humanity remains one family. Above all, Genesis presents a God who is powerful without being needy, just without being cruel, and faithful even when human beings fail. For modern readers, the practical challenge is clear. Live with purpose. Treat others with dignity. Take responsibility for your choices. Invest in relationships. Remain faithful during adversity. Practice justice and mercy, and never lose hope that renewal is possible. These ancient stories continue to provide profound answers to perennial questions about God and human beings